Vajra sattva samaya anupalaya Vajra sattva denopa tishta dido membhava Sudho kayo membhava Supho kayo membhava Anurato membhava Sarva siddhi membrayacha Sarva karma suchame Chitam shreya guru Ha 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 ho bhagavan Sarva Tathagata Vajra Mame Muncha Vajre Bhava Maha Samaya Sato Vajra Satwa Samaya Anupalaya Vajra Satwa Deno Bhatishta Dhedo Membhava Sutto Kayo Membhava Supo Kayo Membhava Anurato Membhava Sarva Siddhi Membrayacha Sarva Karma Suchame Chitam Shreya Guru Ha 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 ho Bhagavan Sarva Tathagata Vajra Mame Munja Vajre Bhava Maha Samaya Sadhu Vajra Satwa Samaya Anupalaya Vajra Satwa Tenopa Tishta Dedo Membhava Sutto Kayo Membhava Supo Kayo Membhava Anurato Membhava Sarva Siddhim Memprayacha Sarva Karma Sucha Me Chitam Shreya Guru Ha 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 ho Bhagavan Sarva Tathagata Vajra Mame Muncha Vajre Bhava Maha Samaya Sato Okay, good afternoon. Welcome back. So before our break, we talked about the five Buddha families. Then specifically for the rest of this afternoon, we will focus specifically on the Lotus family, on Amitabha. But before I do that, let's see if there are questions. You can ask the questions by typing in the chat, or you could raise your virtual hand, and then we will ask you to unmute when you do that. I see a virtual hand. Yes.
You were talking about when the first moment of sight or sensation is ignorance. If I'm not sure I'm saying it correctly, but you were talking about when the first moment of ignorance arises in that very first sighting of something, and you can recognize it.
Go on.
That you then become enlightened, or that is a moment of enlightenment. Is that what you said?
What's the question? Keep going.
Well,
That's
the
not exactly
question,
what I said, but it's okay. Keep going. I know where we are. So
okay, but if the first moment of ignorance, that by definition is that you are not going to recognize it. So how does it?
no. You over apply the meaning of ignorance.
Okay.
Yeah. But okay, keep asking the question.
Well, that was the question. I mean, that was the question. If the first moment is ignorance, you can't see it.
Yeah, no. Okay.
Or at least I can't.
Yeah, no. Let's clarify what was said.
Okay.
So this was in the context of the Dharmadhatu. So first of all, we have to start there. Right now, how we relate to everything, whether our own mind, our situation, our body, or when we look out there, we say tables, chairs, cars, snow, sun, or neighbor, friend, enemy, or everything, right? All of this. Right now, how do we relate to all of this? Well, we relate to all of this in whatever special brand, special mix of ignorance that we have. uh, then, if we have received teachings in the Dharma, and then at least we know how to identify all of this as samsaric perception. So then within the context of this, we say this right now is part of samsaric perception, and therefore the experience that the quality that arises from experiencing this as samsaric perception is characterized by dissatisfaction, characterized by stress, characterized by suffering. And then also, because we have been exposed to Buddhist teachings, we have received Buddhist teachings, then we also know Buddha says, however, there is a solution to this. There can be an end to this. And if you do the following, then you will put an end to this samsaric perception. And that is what we call achieving nirvana. Now, all of this comes from, or you could say, is the playing out of an initial not knowing. Not knowing what? Not knowing that this is Dharma Dhatu. Then when you zoom into this not knowing that this is Dharma Dhatu, and therefore this is Dharma Dhatu, meaning what? Meaning samsara is actually not real. And if samsara is not real, then nirvana is also not real. But as long as we have already given power over to the not real samsara, then we need the not real nirvana to counteract the not real samsara. But all of this has to play out because of an initial not recognizing this is Dharma Dhatu. The very basic not recognizing of this Dharma Dhatu in the Mahamudra teachings is called co-emergent ignorance. So that's the ignorance. Why does it have this peculiar expression, co-emergent ignorance? In general Buddhist teachings, it's simply called ignorance. But in the Mahamudra explanation, it is called co-emergent ignorance. Why? Because that expression is to remind us, to tell us, actually, even that ignorance has no basis. Yes.
So it's co-emergent because it's ignorance and
Emptiness.
emptiness or ignorance and some aspect of wisdom
Emptiness.
together.
Yes. Ignorance is also empty.
Okay. Thank you.
So in Mahamudra expression, it's called co-emergent ignorance.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm not sure it answered your question, but maybe it did away with your question. There's a difference between answering the question and sweeping the question away. It feels more like sweeping away the question than answering the question.
I'm really not sure what my question was. I guess my comment was to ask you to clarify that because
Yes.
I didn't understand it.
Yeah. No, that's good. So
Okay.
we cleared
Okay.
the question, cleared away.
Okay.
So, in the liturgy, the description of Sukhavati seems to appeal a lot to our samsaric sensual attachment.
Yes.
Like offering clouds of pleasures with pleasant
Yes.
forms. Why does the liturgy here want to appeal so strongly to our attachment, sensual
Yeah, it's
attachment?
working. It's working on that level, you know. Yeah. Maybe when we uh, go more into, this whole attachment issue, we'll see some other things. Yes, it's clearly, not only that, it's clearly working with uh, Indian attachments. As I said, all this thing about gold and precious gems, I don't know, on a regular day, how many of you and I wake up going, ooh, where can I get more gold? Where can I get more rubies? I mean, in the abstract, who doesn't want rubies, right? But it's not necessarily what grabs our attention, right? So if you want to update, descriptions of the Pure Land, maybe it's like, the latest model of iPhone that spontaneously appears, internet that has super fast, whatever it is that we obsess over, and it says, when you go to this Pure Land, all of this is spontaneously manifesting, spontaneously arising. And for that matter, it's also kind of a description that appealed to the main audience being addressed, right? Which is monastic and male. So in some descriptions of Pure Land, it kind of assures, these monastic males, and there are no distractions of women over there. Actually, as opposed to descriptions of the Deva realms, there people who want to go to Deva realms don't see, right, the attractiveness of women as something they need to deal with as a problem. And so descriptions of the Deva realms will say, oh, in the Deva realms, there's all these beautiful women and this and that, But addressing a monastic audience, male, you know, what statistics say, what 90 whatever percent probably heterosexual. So you're addressing that population, and they are like having a hard time keeping their minds away from thinking about women. So then, oh, when you get to this Pure Land, you don't even have to think about that. It's like no more a problem there. Yeah, so that was like the kind of it's appealing to a set of it's painting, in other words, a realm where wanting is no longer a problem. Yeah. Now it's still a problem. So it's appealing to that. You can get to this place where wanting, where desiring is finished.
I see.
Yeah. There are other descriptions of Pure Lands where it is, you could say, more tantric types of Pure Land. Yeah. So there, right, with a slightly different kind of maybe even social context of the origins of some of these text teachings about tantric Pure Lands, perhaps now no longer addressing young men who have to, yes, unnaturally restrained desire. There, these types of Pure Lands, have dakinis, like dancing around naked. So obviously, it's addressed to a group that wasn't necessarily struggling with, but in fact have some kind of mastery, you can say, over naked women now.
Yeah.
So we need to kind of, we need to kind of like understand who was the primary audience, and then I think in a fair way you could say, well, in that case, these aspiration prayers, I don't know, but then the problem is, ourselves writing a new aspiration prayer, we may not be so convinced that it's effective. So then we have to do like this kind of interpretive, or translation up in our head. What are we really aspiring? What are we saying? Where are we saying we want to go to? So now, so let's go back to. So this is a good segue to maybe starting to talk about the secret mantra teachings on desire, attachment, longing, and what is the problem with that, and so on and so forth. Okay, so we can now. This reminds me of. So there is a story in the Buddha's life. He has one of his. Let me see. It's a stepbrother, I think, if I remember correctly. Either stepbrother, I think stepbrother. He has a stepbrother and sister called Nanda and Sunanda. Not Ananda, but Nanda. So Nanda was a stepbrother or cousin or nephew, someone close, okay? Male, from a privileged background like himself, princely, all of that. And Nanda was younger, much younger than the Buddha. So maybe it's a nephew. I fuzzy now. But Nanda was very, you could say, very active young man with an active appetite for beautiful forms, especially beautiful women. So I said that, he didn't care to focus on anything. Then wasn't really interested in studying, wasn't really interested in training to be a good warrior and this and that. He just hung out all the time with his many girlfriends. And then the story goes that but finally when he was talked into taking a wife, so close to that event, maybe the day before or something like that. Now, of course, footnote, in their context back in that time, him taking a wife doesn't mean he has to stop seeing other women. Especially with his privileged background, he could just have more wives, So it's not really a solution. It's just one way to contain his interest. But right that time, the Buddha said, kind of declared to his disciples, now is the time. Now the time is ripe. And now is the time to go tame this cousin of mine. So he says, he sent someone, he said, please call him, say I want to see him. And so Nanda comes, to see the Buddha. And the Buddha says, so, people say, you really like, women, beautiful women. And Nanda kind of shyly, admits, yeah, I like them. And Buddha said, okay, here, let me take you on a journey. So it says that miraculously, so Buddha held his hand, and the next thing he knows, he's like in a different realm with the Buddha. And the Buddha said, and he said, like, where are we? And the Buddha says, we are in the first of the 6 levels of the gods of the central realm. And particularly Nanda noticed, there are these women that are just drop dead gorgeous. He never seen such beautiful women. Then Buddha said, you like what you see? And he said, yes. My gosh, they are ravishing. And Buddha said, yeah. I said, okay, let's keep going. And again, they kind of, flew up. And then they arrived at this new place. The women were even more amazing. And Nanda said, where are we now? He said, well, we're 1 level higher. And the Buddha said, you like what you see here? And I said, yes. And Buddha said, well, what about those that you saw minutes ago? He said, no. I'm not interested in those. I want these. So they keep going until the very top of this central realm, six realms. And by that point, Nanda was completely like, yes, these are the ones that I really want. And the Buddha said, so what about that wife you're marrying, next week, tomorrow? She's like, oh, wait, what? No, never mind. Not interested. The next moment they're back, in the monastery, wherever. And then Nanda said, what happened? Buddha says, well, if you really want, that last place, the beautiful goddesses that you saw, then you have to practice in order to be reborn there. And in that way, Nanda entered the monastic order, gave up all the women that he had access to in the human realm. And it's said that from there, then Buddha trained him until he finally achieved arhatship. And so, this Sukhavati description is a version of kind of pulling us in and then leading or delivering us to a different level of maturity, you could say, right? So we have this expression, stages of the path, like Lamrim. Of course, in the Tibetan context, stages of the path have turned into a very kind of, almost you could say, rigid, first level, second level, third level, or first you have to cultivate this, then cultivate this, cultivate. I think that's a little bit too rigid, More generally, Lamrim is the idea that we have to we have to mature our understanding. So then the Buddha will start at the level of hooking us in, bringing us in, working with where we are. And so on the path also, we need to know where we are. Just because, everything is impermanent, so to say, that doesn't mean right now you throw everything out. Just because all desire entails suffering, it doesn't mean now indiscriminately, no matter what desire, I'm going to throw away. No, the path consists of skillfully, meaning wisely choosing what to hold on to, what to set aside, and then keep that fresh, keep that evolving, knowing what next to put aside, what next to hold on to, and going and going and going until we mature. So this is the notion of stages of the path. Then, of course, within this context, I've used before the analogy that think of it as, we will in the path, in the journey to awakening, it's we will come up to a wall and then overcome that wall, like the barrier, into the next barrier, into the next barrier, in the next barrier, right? These walls. So when we come up against a wall, we need to kind of like really examine this wall, Is it like a Great Wall of China, thickness of wall? Machu Picchu walls, stone walls? Or is it, Japanese room walls? So some of these walls, reasonably, if we push hard enough, we can get to the other side of the barrier. Some of these walls, right now, no matter how hard you push, you are not going to break over to the other side. You may even hurt yourself. So we need to kind of wisely know how much to push yourself and how much to hold back. So this is really important, with Dharma practice. But many of us, have this very kind of rigid mind, not workable. This rigid mind, rigidly push or rigidly lazy. No, skillfully know when to be stubborn and when to be lazy. And this is to be developed. Developed within the context of sincerely refining your motivation. That is the only guarantee, so to say, or insurance, so that you're not kidding yourself. Either if you are the very do type, or the surrender type, either type can become false. But either approach can become qualities. And so we want to develop in such a way that we can turn these habits that we have into qualities that help. And how can we do that? then refining bodhicitta is important. Refining purifying our intentions. That is the only kind of insurance against straying off. Yeah. So now, coming back to Amitabha. So in the Padma family, the afflictive emotion that is of the Padma family is what we called, variously translate as attachment, desire. So this is basically this wanting, this longing. I want, I'm longing, I desire. And then from there, right, becoming attached, then becoming possessive, then becoming fixated. So all that whole kind of family of connected emotions. But basically, the very basic one is this sense of like I want, I'm longing. So in a way, you could say at the root of it, the root of desire, and in a way, maybe you could say, at the root of desire is actually the desire for what? The desire to have happiness and the desire to be free from suffering. Insofar as that go, we say all sentient beings, from those who are now temporarily under the most heinous afflictions, so the most terrible people you can think of, in terms of how they are acting, the choices that they're making in the world. What motivates them? What makes them wake up and get out of bed? It's not that different at the base level from what makes, His Holiness the Dalai Lama wake up and want to get out of bed, which is looking for happiness and looking to be as far separated from suffering as we can. So where does that come from? Where does that basic want happiness, don't want suffering? Nobody ever taught us. Where does that come from? That comes from our basic nature, which means our basic nature is predisposed towards what? Towards happiness. And that's why no amount of unhappiness, no amount of experiencing unhappiness is going to, no amount of experiencing unhappiness is going to make suffering or unhappiness feel natural. No amount of practicing suffering is going to, is suffering going to feel natural? So relaxing. No. So in fact, desire and attachment are, in that sense, you could say, arising from what is most natural and basic to us. So in that sense, You don't need to condemn yourself. You don't need to punish yourself. Don't need to yell at yourself if you have a lot of desires, if you have a lot of attachment, if you have a lot of wants. So first of all, from in that sense, from the secret mantra point of view, you want to you want to recognize that that all of this comes from actually the innate nature that we call Buddha nature. But obviously, it's not just that. It may come from there, but again, because of not knowing. Yeah, back to the explanation I gave to Judy's question. Because of not knowing this as Dharma Dhatu, or more direct to not knowing mind as Dharmakaya, then from that very basic, that level of not knowing almost seems like innocent, almost seems like you may compare to like the grosser types of problems that you and I are very familiar with. When you look at that initial, so to say, you say, well, what's the problem? That seems so innocent. See, that's where it all started. That's where it all started. So in one Zen text, famous text, I think it's called Trusting in the Mind. It says, just a hair's wide, the wideness, which is not very wide, of the size of one hair, How many millimeter is that? Point something, whatever millimeter, a strand of hair, just that much of like separation. Now heaven and earth has been formed. So it's on that very subtle level of not recognizing, oh, this is Dharmakaya. And then it grows and it grows and it grows. The discrepancy, the separation, the duality. And then all of samsara now plays out. Then wanting, and then wanting and not getting. That's when it begins to play out. So from to take secret mantra understanding into how we relate to desire and wants, first of all, recognize that actually it's not some evil thing that some Buddhist devil introduced into the world to muck it up. It comes from our basic nature, but basic nature not recognized. Then in order to satisfy that basic nature, and because of non-recognition, because of not knowing, because of non-recognition, not knowing, avidya, marikpa, because of that, then it becomes timuk, it becomes delusion. And then now things have become distorted. And then, with regards to this issue, this basic klesha of wanting, of desiring, and then it becomes stronger and stronger and stronger. Then all the different flavors of this klesha begins to play out, begins to unfold. In fact, in a way, you could say, even from I mean, each of these kleshas, if we tackle each of them, right, you can explain all the other kleshas from each of these kleshas. So there's a, inter connectivity. So if you just focus on the topic today of the klesha of desire, the affliction, the mental defilement of desire, right? And from this perspective, right, anger, annoyance, right, also comes from desire. Also comes from desire. And because of desire, then delusions become bigger and bigger and bigger. I mean, you have all experienced that, no? Because of desire, you exaggerate. The delusions keep growing and growing and growing. All of us have experienced that before. Whether it's a thing that we desire, or a person that we desire, or a situation we desire, right? Oh, once that desire starts, we exaggerate how desirable that thing, that person, that situation is. And gets more and more diluted. At the same time, back to that issue of, if we look at it from the perspective of just desire, anger also comes from there. How? I don't know about other countries, but the statistics are staggering. I don't know. I don't remember exactly, but most gun violence in this country, in the US, is done by someone who knows you, and more specifically, someone attached to you. In comparison to gun violence from random strangers, gun violence from people you know, and specifically all the exes and on the way to become exes is where most of the violence occurs. Because someone's desire is frustrated. Because someone's desire has been derailed. Right? Then it manifests. Right? It plays out as anger. Even murderous anger. Because things are not going the way you want them to go. Things are not playing out the way you desire them to be. You get annoyed. You get angry. Right? So so sometimes it leads to you wanting it more, sometimes it leads to you wanting to destroy it. If I cannot have it, nobody can have it. If I cannot have this person, nobody can have this person. If I cannot have this situation, nobody can have this situation. That's one possible response to desire being frustrated. Another one is desire being frustrated. Oh, I double down my desire. Then I increase my delusion about the desirability of that situation. And then you even talk yourself into how reasonable it is that you're doing all these ridiculous things. Meanwhile, people around standing there watching. Oh my God. We have all watched that, unfolding with people around us. And other people have watched that unfolding in us. But when we are in the thick of desire, we think everything is so reasonable. And if a good friend, a real good friend comes by to point out that this is ridiculous, you want to bite their heads off. Right? You even stop being friends. Much less if it is the guru, it's like, oh, fire the guru immediately. If they dare to point out how absurd the situation is. Because delusion. So the three poisons are never separated. They always act together, It's just that one predominates in any situation. Then the other mental defilements are very happy to come help. They get along very well, They're very cooperative. And they will all come. So we get to the point of what is the real problem with desire? So first of all, I think we can notice that desire is related to pleasure. Yeah? That which is pleasurable, we find to be desirable. Right? Yeah, we can agree on that. So now it takes us back to that precognitive part of our moment-to-moment experience. From moment to moment to moment, specific moment of mind arises. That mind, that consciousness is conscious of something. So contact is made. When contact is made, even before perception comes into the picture, there is a precognitive response already to that contact. And that precognitive response is a painful response, a pleasurable response, and a neutral response. Only in the next moment do we have perception coming in. Like perception, as in you could also translate it as recognition, comes in. Oh, that's what it is. So Buddha's pointing this out shows us, how in a way, right, how deeply seated are our likes and dislikes. How deep, our addiction to pleasure, our hate to pain is encoded, so that it's even precognitive. Even before you know exactly what it is, you already have this basic tone of liking or disliking based on whether that contact has given rise to something pleasurable or something painful. Then, of course, Buddha explains, well, where does that come from? Not from nowhere, comes from habit. Habits accumulated lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. So we respond like that. And then in the next moment is what we call perception or cognition. You cognize, and more specifically, you recognize. Oh, and then once recognition, once cognition, once perception has taken place, then mental formations play out. Then associations. Oh, this is this is this, this is how, and this also means this is also related to that, and that is that, and that is that. And then that's where what you and I normally call feelings begin to aggregate, begin to multiply. Then the whole story now starts to take shape. Then the whole reason as to why you should do something or you should not do something, why you want something, why you don't want something, all that is at the level of different types of mental formations, also called volitional activities. In Sanskrit, it's called samskara, not samsara, different word, samskara or sankara. But all these mental formations, sabbe sankara anicca, all mental formations are impermanent because they are composites. That's also, Buddha's good news. They are all temporary. So in Pali, sabbe sankhara, anicca. All sanskara, all formations are unstable, not permanent, momentary, temporary. That's good news, actually. But anyway, right? So desire is directly related to pleasure. That which is pleasurable with desire. At this point in the evolution of suffering, you could say there's no problem yet. You could say there's no problem yet. Contrary to what some of us might feel, the Buddha is not against pleasure. I think you have heard me say this before. The Buddha is not against pleasure. Whether doesn't matter what kind of pleasure. Of course, if that pleasure involves harming someone else, then of course that pleasure is faulty. Okay, let's just say no one is harmed in the process of this pleasure arising. In that sense, that kind of pleasure, the Buddha has no criticism. The Buddha, is not some kind of like anti-pleasure, cult leader trying to prevent his disciples from experiencing pleasure. So that's not where the Buddha has a problem with. In a way, you could even say that the Buddha doesn't necessarily have a problem with desire itself, and therefore also no problem with pleasure. The problem arises when desire, which is motivated by pleasure, right, meets what? Meets obstacle to fulfilling desire. That is when a problem starts. So my desire to quench thirst, right, in this instance, because I got ready, I prepared my, hydration, put it near to me, right? So my desire to quench thirst is non-problematic right now. No problem. Because my desire and my desire for the satisfaction, there is very little gap in between my desire and the ability to fulfill that desire so that I reach satisfaction, right? So in that case now, everything is fine. Everything is well. Where the problem starts is what I desire and my ability to bridge the gap between what I desire and me cannot be bridged so easily. And when it cannot be breached, what happens? When it cannot be bridged, when my desire and what I desire, that gap is too big, then what happens? Frustration happens. That is when suffering turns up explicitly. Frustration that arises from not being able to close the gap between desire and the object of desire. Now, Most of us foolishly think, if I spend my life, whether today, this week, this month, these 10 years, this 100 years, my whole lifetime, if I just go about my whole lifetime, making sure that the gap between my desire and what I desire can always be closed, can always be bridged, then that is how I will become happy. So that is where the difference is between, right, all the people causing harm in the world and all the people bringing good in the world. Between the proverbial Mother Teresa and the proverbial Hitlers. Which is all our mistaken ideas of how to bridge that gap between desire and the object of desire. But more basic than that, what the Buddha taught in Secret Mantra is seeing this whole process and understanding this whole process, understanding the evolution or the architecture of desire, pleasure, frustration, and then all the surrounding afflictions that quickly come together. Seeing all of that, then training our hearts, our minds to have a different relationship with desire. So in the sutra level, first thing Buddha taught there is, first, learn how to pause. Learn how to stop in your tracks. In other words, cultivate restraint. So he gave, all these sets of vows, such as the 5 lay vows. The 5 lay vows are said to be the basic foundation of all the other vows. The novice vows, the probationary nuns' vows, the novice monks' vows, novice nuns' vows, fully ordained monks, fully ordained nuns, and from 5 to 300 plus, 253, and so on and so forth. All these vows, all these precepts of training, Buddha gave on that level as a way for us to learn how to practice restraint. We are all rushing towards what we think will make us happy. First, Buddha says, stop. Like, press your brakes. Slow down. Don't just madly rush towards what we think will bring us happiness. Pause. Stop. Learn how to say no. Learn how to pause. Learn how to stop. Then learn how to see clearly between this is going to bring happiness, this is going to bring suffering. So this that is going to bring happiness, easy enough, not so complicated. Although there can be some complications. If we go about cultivating that which will bring happiness, but cultivating them in a distorted motivation and understanding, then it's also not a solution. But by and large, with regards to the causes of happiness, it's less problematic and more straightforward. But with regards to what will give rise to suffering, First thing is know how to say no. Know how to restrain yourself. Know how to have self-control. And you do it, and you do it. You keep exercising that muscle that knows how to say no, that muscle that knows how to, protect you from suffering. So that's the first step. That's the Sutrayana emphasis. So all kinds of so there's this example given. So in order to protect us from poisoning ourselves, the Buddha will say, the Buddha says, look, not all plants, should be eaten, because some of them are poisonous, and can, if you eat, can cause a lot of pain. So at first, the Buddha will say, don't go picking greens over there. Don't go picking greens over there, because there are poisonous plants there. Stay away. There's poison ivy. There is dangerous plants. Don't go there. So that's the level of restraint. And then Buddha says, over there, they're all good. Everything there is good for you. You can eat there. They're good, they're healthy, they're tasty. But over there, don't. Don't even go there. Some of those plants you don't even need to eat. You just brush up against them, and pain comes. Like stinging nettles, and other types of poisonous plants, like poison ivy, poison oak, don't even go there. So that's the first level of relating to desire. Practice restraint with regards to desire. Once we have established the ability to restrain ourselves and not to, at the drop of a pin, any suggestion that this may be satisfying, we rush, like a mad rush, towards these things. Once we have developed a certain coolness, a certain restraint, a certain even mind, then the next skill the Buddha trains us in is, now Buddha will say, actually, among this patch where there are all these poisonous plants, there are also some nutritious things, some tasty things. So, for example, just in nature, where blackberries grow in the wild, generally, poison ivy also grows there. But if right now, you don't know how to avoid poison ivy, best not to go picking blackberries. At the next level, Buddha says, now you need to know how to recognize what's poison ivy. You need to then now you can go and pick blackberries, but know what poison ivy looks like. But also some of us, even if we know, but we are so sensitive, to poison ivy, even without really touching, when near we can break out in hives. We can have an allergic reaction. So for those types, yeah, don't go near poison. Don't go near. No matter how much you like to eat blackberries, stay away. Go make money and go to the store and buy your blackberries. But the Buddha does have ways, methods given to say you can have antidote, you can have prevention. So that if you break out in an allergic reaction, you have medicine, you have antihistamine you can take. You can put on gloves. You can put on a protective suit to go harvest your blackberries. So that's the next level. Right? Both of these, you could say, is part of Sutrayana training. The first one, the restraint, is the baseline, and that is called the individual protection level, the so-called Hinayana, where the focus is just on yourself. The next one is the Mahayana, general Mahayana, not secret mantra Mahayana. General Mahayana is because blueberries are good for others, good for you, even though they grow among poisonous things. Now, with proper preparation, proper training, knowing how to prevent, and also knowing how to apply antidote, now you can go to the blackberry patches and to try to harvest them. Because you know how to prevent, and in case prevention doesn't work, you know how to apply antidote. At the secret mantra level, the understanding towards that patch of poisonous plants now has evolved. It is still poison, but now, so the analogy given is, it says, that how peacocks, peacocks are revered creatures in India, because, they're so beautiful and, it says how peacocks gain that beautiful color that they have is that they get those colors from eating poisonous plants. Probably not true, Probably it's like Indian folk belief. But the peacock becomes a symbol of having developed the ability to eat poisonous plants and not die of the poison, but instead that poison transmutes into the beautiful colors of peacock feathers. So this is at a level where you have evolved, you could say, your digestive system has evolved so that you can eat. You can take this poison and your body will turn this poison into that which makes these beautiful feathers. That is at the level of secret mantra. Now, this all sounds very exciting. Whoa! And my guideline is, if you're excited by it, that means not for you. That means you need to go back to restraint first. It's like telling kids, you can do whatever you want. Yes! You can do whatever you want when you have the power to do whatever you want. But that power of doing whatever you want is not the power to cancel out karmic cause and effect. Okay, karmic cause and effect doesn't change. So this is maybe a subtle point, but a very important point. Don't think that, peacocks are not functioning under the karmic cause and effect universe. So don't think, Vajrayana practitioners, secret mantra practitioners, somehow get a special get out of jail free, pass, from the Buddhists. So they can indulge in all kinds of afflictive emotions. And there are no consequences. A lot of people believe this, That's why people who are attracted to Tibetan Buddhism tends to be a little, because we like, to live dangerously. Oh, yes, I can do this and that, and it doesn't matter, Actually, those of you from Kasa Tibet, I think you all don't have this problem. This is the power of Lama Tony's commitment. So different teachers attract different types of students. Generally speaking, I think Kasa Tibet Network don't have such a high proportion of magic thinking people looking for dangerous things. But in many other Tibetan Buddhist centers, there's a high concentration of people who thrive on magic thinking and living dangerously, and then swinging back and forth between happiness and suffering, like Tarzan, but most of the time falling into the ground and then get eaten by lions, and then wake up again and think, oh, maybe next time it won't be so bad. Then again, swinging in the jungle, up and down, happiness and suffering, and then fall. And then think, I am a Mahasiddha. No. Even Mahasiddhas, don't say Mahasiddhas, even Buddha cannot bypass, cannot subvert karmic causality. So when peacocks are able to eat poison, it's not that they are living out of, right? It's not that they are not subject to natural laws. It's that their digestive system, right, has evolved, right? And so that is possible. We can change our level. Right now, we are not peacocks. In fact, right now, I have some friends. I have this one friend, this Korean nun, from when I was in graduate school. Her immune system is so sensitive in that sense, She says that if she stands under a ginkgo tree for more than a few minutes, she can break out in hives. Her immune system would immediately get activated. So if we are still at that level, and then first we need how to train our immune system to not send out, the full military at the first instance of one potential enemy turning up. So we begin by the basic training of restraint. Then, at the level of secret mantra, it is actually said, if you stay at the level of restraint, you are not finally done. You're not yet free from the kleshas. So it is necessary at some point in our training to knowingly, deliberately bring in that klesha, to stir up the response that potentially could result in suffering. So in other words, coming back to the example, the klesha of desire, mostly we need to train how to say no to desire. Even down to things that the gap between your desire and what you desire can easily be bridged. Even with that, you train restraint. Again, not because the Buddha don't think you should be hydrated. So sometimes, even though you have water prepared, and there's nothing unmoral, unethical with drinking water, even with that, you should train in restraint because you're training a muscle. You get what I'm saying? Yeah? So next time, when the mind says, thirsty, 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 drink, drink, drink. Again, don't go into autopilot. Oh, yes, pour and drink. Instead, you notice, oh, look at the mind. The mind says, drink, drink, drink. Need water, need water. But then you're like, really? Or is it just habit? Actually, most of the time it's just habit. It's not actually that, you're so dehydrated you're going to die. I mean, not even die, you're so dehydrated, you're going to get a seizure. We never, ever, rarely get that dehydrated. But it's just our habit patterns. So it's good to practice restraint, even with the things that we can easily achieve. Why? Again, not because the Buddha hates pleasure. The Buddha has something against satisfaction. Actually, the Buddha says pleasure and satisfaction are good. But because we don't have a healthy relationship right now with pleasure and satisfaction, so we need to train. We need to train restraint. When we have developed restraint, then no longer, to a point where drinking can become normal again, drinking water to rehydrate can be an act of freedom rather an act of habit, much less an act that comes with a lot of desires tied to it. So then it becomes an act of freedom, an act of liberation. Then, when we have reached this level, then we can deliberately bring in an object of desire that creates a lot of longing, a lot of want. Okay? So this is where you may have heard, right? There's these things, certain kinds of practices to harness sexual desire, things like that. Even like karma mudra, things like that. Actually, it is in Tantra, but it's greatly misunderstood. It's not like for you to have it all, Now that you are a programmer, now that you are rich, now you can also get enlightened and have a bunch of, partners. But in Tantra, in secret mantra, there is indeed Practice is where, when you are qualified, you create the situation for that strong desire to arise. But this is where the difference is. When the desire arises, yeah, instead of seeking, so desire has arisen, and so when desire arises, it arises in relation to an object of desire, right? So you deliberately bring the object to mind, whether it's mentally or physically bring the object to mind. Then great desire arises. At that point, in secret mantra, what you're supposed to do is you tell the object, okay, now you can go. Yeah? But then you don't suppress the desire. The object has done its job. You're like, okay, you can go now. Now you now have this desire, this longing. But before it turns into frustration, you master this. You dissolve it. You dissolve it. How do you dissolve it? It says you dissolve it into the Mahamudra state. The first time you do this, maybe not so successful. Or maybe even successful, the effect is short term. You're like, oh, yes, no problem. But through habituation, until you completely dissolve, then at that point, you don't have to avoid. Restraint is definitely something the Buddha taught. But still, at that level, you are avoiding stirring up the desire, which is a necessary skill and ability to have. But the final ability you want is to have power over desire. Is to have power over desire. And sometimes, depending on different secret mantra methods, some methods would bring the desire up, and from there even bring the pleasure that comes from desire being fulfilled up. So they take the next step, even the next step of pleasure arising. But when that pleasure arises, mastering that pleasure, mastering that bliss, so that it's not powering, it's not controlling you, you're controlling it. Then that's freedom. Now, to what level you can practice, right? Well, you have to be very honest with your own process, your ability. But just understanding even a little bit of this principle, we can, I think, in a realistic way, apply, into our circumstance, these different understandings of desire, pleasure. And you say, well, how do I know? Well, you will know when you have suffering or you don't have suffering. If in your practice, of this, you just end up having more suffering, then well, not doing it right. Yeah. You don't kid yourself and say, oh, I can handle this. I can. And then, and definitely don't do it so that you are causing suffering to someone else. That's like the most basic line you need to draw if you're going to work with desire, attachment. Don't cause other people suffering. That's the most basic line. If you cross that line, then it doesn't matter what you say you're doing. You're already creating negative karma. So, questions, comments? So, the nature of Amitabha, to link it back, the essence of Amitabha is this mastery over desire, and therefore freedom from desire.
We've got a few questions from Casa Tibet, Guatemala.
Sure.
The first one is, I would like to confirm, is it true that without wisdom there is no realization of emptiness?
Yeah, by definition, wisdom is the wisdom of the realization of emptiness. So maybe whoever asked that question, maybe you're asking something else? It's a tautology. Yes, next. In Buddhism, when we say wisdom, it's the wisdom of emptiness. It's the wisdom of selflessness. Yeah. It's not something else, It's not like, I don't know, some new age wisdom stuff, Yes, next question.
Next one, my strongest klesha is anger. It hijacks me and envelops me completely. I end up causing harm with my words and actions. How can I release or eliminate this afflictive emotion? Should I remove myself from the places and situations that trigger my anger?
Correct. Start with restraint. Then see the burdensome nature of anger. See the heaviness of anger. Restraint doesn't mean like bury your head in the sand and say, don't get angry, don't get angry, I'm not angry, I'm not angry. No, it doesn't mean that. Restraint means, don't feed it, but then stay with the uncomfortableness of it. Because the more you experience how uncomfortable it is, then the less you are going to give it energy. Most of the time, I think how samsara works is it works by sleight of hand, we can say, by nature. So nature of delusion, Why samsara is so powerful? Because there are lots of tricks. And the main trick is to make us forget how heavy, how burdensome, how painful acting out the kleshas are. Back to my analogy of, the prison authorities are always coming up with things to keep you there. Oh, extra movie night. Oh, this movie night includes pizza. Then you'll never want to leave prison. That's the main kind of trouble with confused existence, is that, lots and lots of tricks get churned out to keep us here. And mainly it comes from not paying attention, which is what mindfulness means. Mindfulness means pay attention. Don't forget. Skillful paying attention. Skillful not forgetting. And so don't just like discard anger because, that's bad for me. But actually feel how bad it is. Stay with it and feel, this is so burdensome. This is so painful. This is so terrible. And then it's sort of like, smell how bad it smells. Until you're fully convinced that it stinks, then you throw away.
And the final one, as a foe destroyer or arhat, Are there no longer any lower rebirths? If so, would they still remain in a samsaric level in the human form or also in higher realms? Thank you.
When you are at the risk of achieving that, come ask this question again. Next question.
That's all for those.
Anything else in the chat? I'm not able to see actually. Okay. I know those types of questions, they are theoretical. And there are answers, ready-made answers. You can probably AI has more information than me. Right? You can ask AI that question; they'll give you all sorts of answers. I used to be pretty good at answering those questions. Pretty good, so that I come out looking pretty good with my answer. But now I'm resisting answering those questions so as not to kind of increase my pride. One point. Second point is to say that Buddha's teachings, even though there's a lot of theory, even though there's a lot of sophisticated, or at least seemingly sophisticated answer that over the years, Buddhists debating Hindus, Buddhists debating other Buddhists, have come up with these kind of ready-made answers. The most important things about the Dharma is how we can apply that to our kleshas right now. Then, like people say, oh, should I be an arhat? Should I be a bodhisattva? Of course, for Mahayana training, we emphasize the importance of taking the bodhisattva vow. Yes. But at the end of the day, if we then get too carried away with well, maybe arhat is better, maybe bodhisattva is better. And often this is when, we are exposed to Theravada teachings, and then we're exposed to Mahayana teachings, and then we like to compare and think this and that, then Ajahn Chah, gave, in my opinion, Mahamudra answer. He says, to be an arhat is one kind of suffering. To be a bodhisattva is one kind of suffering. To be nothing is no kind of suffering. As long as you want to be this, you have this kind of suffering. If you want to be that, you have that kind of suffering. If you know how to get to the point of not wanting anything anymore, then you are free from suffering. Other questions?
I have a question. When you mentioned sitting with the desire and then dissolving it into Mahamudra, I assume that requires some experience with actually some experience with Mahamudra. So
Yes.
I'm curious if maybe then this is kind of like null, but what actually dissolving something is.
Oh, well, Mahamudra realization would dissolve it, What is Mahamudra realization? Well, realizing nature of mind, trusting in that realization, familiarizing with that realization. So at the level of words, there is nothing really beyond that. And already there are lots and lots of Mahamudra texts that have been translated, and you can all go read it, But until we actually know how to extract the oil from the sesame, reading all the books about how to extract oil from sesame, while useful, is not useful until we actually obtain sesame and is willing to pound the sesame and through trial and error figure out how to extract oil from sesame.
Thank you.
Yes. Here, let's give you. Yeah.
Thank you. So, bringing in a klesha,
Mhm.
is that why at some Buddhist or Tibetan ceremonies they serve meat? It's because to say, you know, on this.
That's something else. That's what to say. There are cultural aspects to that, and then there are kind of theoretical. You are referring to this thing that they call talk offering or ganachakra or feast offering. So in the ancient texts, they talk about the using of meat and the use of alcohol. So first of all, the cultural context of this is in Indian society, especially among the high caste, yeah, meat and alcohol, primarily the high caste Indians, abstain from both meat and alcohol, not because of a concern for animal welfare or a concern not to intoxicate the mind, but those two things are considered to be extremely polluting. And being from someone from the high caste, if you pollute yourself that way, you will face censure from others. So a loss of social standing, a loss of reputation, a loss of face, which is a big thing in traditional societies. So there's that context to take into consideration. So from within the context, among the tantric practitioners, which there were Buddhist tantrikas and Hindu tantrikas, so tantra wasn't, but the reason for why they practice tantra, each of them have different explanations. Okay, but in terms of like what you can see people doing, there was a time in India where it's hard to tell. Is this a Hindu tantric? Is this a Hindu tantrika? Or is this a Buddhist tantrika? Today you can tell. But in the context of when these practices became public, like 6th, 7th century or 10th century in India, you can't really tell because they are about doing the same thing. And there, certain rituals involve ingesting meat and alcohol as powerful as well as shocking methods to cut through this whole class, caste, purity ideas, fixations. Original context. Furthermore, in the original context, it's not the kind of meat that today they serve at these rituals. A lot of these tantrikas live in charnel grounds where dead bodies of poor and diseased people who die from disease, are thrown there. So it's human flesh sometimes, not always. Also flesh of dead animals. So even more polluting. And you're supposed to take that. Now, this gets ritualized. Then today, people go get deli meat, I think that's indefensible. Filet mignon. I think that's indefensible. Roadkill maybe still okay. Because we have a certain, even attitude towards roadkill. Oh, like squirrel. Ugh. Yeah, exactly. If you really want to practice the spirit of how this started, get roadkill. Now, as just to clarify, generally speaking, in Drigong Kagyu, because of Gyoba Jigden Sumgun and his emphasis, generally we do not use meat or alcohol for our talk offerings, for our feast offerings. Even in 12th century, Jigden Sumgun said, he said, with regards to alcohol, he says, if you don't have the power to actually change, like make physical changes to that alcohol, he says in many of his teachings, he says, in fact, some have the power to turn alcohol, and by that he's not talking just about beer, he's talking about what we would call hard liquor, can be turned into this white foamy substance, almost like a kefir. And he says, unless it has become that, unless you have the power to turn it into that, you cannot use that. So, in other words, cannot use. So we don't use alcohol. Generally speaking, although there are some who may be more part of the larger Tibetan culture, Then, with regards to meat, very clear, he said, no, we don't use that, he says. Now, cultural. If you read Batu Rinpoche's Words of My Perfect Teacher, the chapter on bodhicitta, he gave a very powerful cultural critique of how this tradition of feast offering, talk offering has basically degenerated into an excuse to party. Right? And his description there, he says, anytime a troop of maroon wearing lamas come into town, the animals are all terrified because the village says, we need to do a feast offering, and they would slaughter, and he said, the sons and daughters of the Buddha are terrifying people. And so he had a very strong critique against the use of, tantric rituals for communal partying. Batu Rinpoche, I think himself wasn't a vegetarian the way we think about vegetarians as like an identity. So his critique is more about misusing tantric rituals. Yeah. So that's kind of an answer in several layers. Yeah. So it's not so much about taking like desire to transform. It's more like taking concepts of disgust and clean and unclean and to cut through that. Yes, John Cheney.
We have another from Guatemala. Can the generation of negative karma come from simply occupying a space? For example, where we live now, there were living beings that had to be displaced in order to inhabit their space. How can we manage or handle that?
Intention is karma. So if you occupy that space and go, ha, yes, so glad I'm here, so that those other idiots cannot be here, then it's negative karma. Otherwise, the only seeming solution to occupying space is to stop occupying space, which then will turn Buddhist practice into a perverse, suicidal cult. But even from that perspective, you don't stop occupying space by killing yourself in this lifetime. You will occupy yet another space. Buddha says, karma is intention. Karma is Intention. Intention determines karma. You have to act with a particular intention, and that determines what kind of karma it becomes. Don't forget, karma is not just bad karma. There's also good karma. There's also skillful karma. There's also bright karma. So, in some ways, don't just occupy yourself with and dread yourself with all sorts of negative karma that you could be doing. You could also focus on all sorts of good karma you could be doing. In the Buddha's own lifetime, he gives Buddha's own example tells us, like you can either focus on the negative and scare the bejesus out of people, or you can encourage people and help them grow. To me, that was the more consistent profile of who Buddha Shakyamuni was. Of course, there are varying accounts, and some of these accounts have come from hundreds and hundreds of years later. But in the historically earliest layer of teachings that we can verify, like, based on unbiased, standards, rather than what believers say. I'm a believer, but I know the limits of belief too. But in a more objective way, if we look at the earliest records of who Buddha was and his personality, I think a fairly consistent picture emerges that he was not the type of teacher that scared people or condemned people. So when one instance, someone who was a butcher came to the Buddha and said, I chance upon you, and I've been listening, following wherever you teach. I've been coming, and now I have a predicament because I'm a butcher. So I know it's negative, but I don't know how to do anything else. And the Buddha basically said to him, can you now, take one day off, every week from being a butcher? And he says, no, I cannot. Then the Buddha says, how about just one morning? He said, okay, I can try. So he did that, And Buddha says, see, now one morning less of butchering. Much better than before already. And slowly, he led this person into, leading them into the path of virtue. We can relate to our own challenges that way. No need to even think about other people. With ourselves, I think many of us are very hard on ourselves. This could be some kind of weird modern psychological complexity of modern times. I don't see that much evidence in the old texts, people being hard on themselves. I don't know what happened, culturally. We are very harsh towards ourselves. And then especially when you now have encountered the Dharma, if we are not careful, Dharma or religion, can make it even worse, You're even more harsh on yourself. More hard on yourself. And then when I find that when we are harsh and hard on ourselves, we are also very harsh and hard on others. Then in the end, nothing good. No metta. So instead, we should apply this to ourselves, not to indulge, not to enable. So we have to be careful, not to enable our suffering, not to enable our kleshas and defilements, and be very honest about that, but also be gentle and kind. Be honest and be gentle and kind. If we have those two qualities, guiding our virtuous practice, our pursuit of the path of virtue, then things can go well. Things can turn out well, even in a very short period of time. So please, do that and cultivate metta. The internet has a lot of resources on that. I have some recordings, some series that I've done at various places. If you go to the Digung Dhammakirti YouTube, there are a few, at least, retreats that I've done on various aspects of Maitri Metta. Maybe those can be useful, and also look elsewhere. Most of the practices of Metta is, it's not complex, but very, very good. Particularly, there's a book I used to recommend when I did these retreats. It's called Awakening Through Love. It's a very good book, I think, by John Makransky. 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 He's now retired, but he used to be a professor in the Northeast. Smith College, or one of those fancy schools up in the Northeast. Oh, Boston College. Yeah, he taught at Boston College, at this Jesuit university called Boston College. And so he wrote a book called Awakening Through Love. A very, very good book, very helpful. So cultivate metta, and that can open up your heart. And then with that kindness and gentleness towards self, towards others, then we can be honest with ourselves, seeing virtue as virtue, non-virtue as non-virtue, without judgment, but recognizing what are flaws and what are qualities, and we can work through that. Yes, Lila.
So I know you were just bringing metta back into the conversation. I sort of came up with this question before you did that, but it's a little different. So to try and connect last week's talking about Maitri to the secret mantra conversation from today, is there, I'm wondering if perhaps dissolving a desire or sitting with a desire and recognizing it, is there a goal to turn that into Maitri in some way? Like,
yes, that is related actually to the Buddha activity of Amitabha family. Remember, the Buddha activity of Amitabha family is what?
loving kindness.
No, magnetize.
Oh, magnetize.
Yes. And how do you achieve magnetizing, according to Gyalpa Rinpoche? Through Maitri.
Wow.
Right? And there's more. Today we don't have time already. There is a set of teachings. It's not from Secret Mantra, but we can bring that in and discuss it in the context of Secret Mantra. It's called the 7 Factors of Awakening. They are in this list appears in many places in the Buddhist tradition, including in the Anapanasati Sutta. There's a section where the 7 elements of awakening. And there we can also talk about desire, discernment. There's more. So the next time we do this series, when we finally get to empowerment, some weekend in April, there's more to elaborate. So here, yes, Lila, your question, full circle, we come back. So Amitabha's Padma family, red in color, is the color of attracting, also controlling, also pulling in, also power over. So all of this, right, can slip into coercive magic. So that is the non-dharma way of magnetizing, to coerce, to force. But the Buddha says there's a power greater than that forceful manipulation and coercion, and it's called Maitri. In a way, Maitri is so coercive that people just fall heads over heels, so to say, in the presence of Maitri. They surrender in the presence of Maitri. So many examples in Buddha's life. He used the power of Maitri to calm a drunken elephant charging at him. Power of Maitri. On the eve of enlightenment, Mara arose. Power of Maitri. Many instances in the Buddha's life, power of Maitri. That's also the main power that forest monks in Thailand talk about. They say it's the power of Maitri. In Thailand, they say, until now there is never a single case of any forest monk being killed by wild animals. Injured by wild animals, yes. But miraculously, even involving tigers, the tigers don't actually kill the monk. There have been monks injured by tigers. Tigers walk around in Thai jungles, okay? So forest monks there are actually dealing with quite scary things. And cobras, But they say the power of Maitri protects them. Yeah. And so we can explore that. Like I said, I'm thinking 2026, it's also related to this Maitri. And this is the fire horse year. So fire is the element of the lotus family. So passion, right? Fire. Then red. So why monastic color, especially in areas where secret mantra is part of the accepted training. The color is maroon, burgundy, red. So on the one level, it's the color of desire, of blood, right? Of desire, of passion. But another level is talking about now it's no longer harming you. It's what you wear to protect you. You have transformed. How do you transform? Through restraint. So this is also the vows, the precepts, the practice of restraint. Yes.
One more question from Guatemala. What role does emptiness play in the transmutation of desire? How can one recognize when desire is being used by the ego rather than by the practice? Why do the texts say that why do the texts say that the same poison can be either medicine or death?
When I get done writing the book, I will send you a copy. Curious minds wants to know, but we apply the Dharma, Don't theorize so much. Take the Dharma to heart. Emptiness, what does that mean? Let's start with understanding things are not fixed, things are not permanent. Get comfortable, get familiar with the unreliable, changing, temporary nature of all experiences, and therefore don't get fixated so strongly on them. Good things, bad things, and don't get shaken so easily. Not a careless, don't care attitude. That is not what I'm talking about. You care deeply about things that are meaningful to you, things that you know can change you, can change your family, can change your community. You invest your time and your effort in there. Do what is good for you. Do what is good for your community. Do what is good for your family. But do all of that with a certain understanding of how all conditions, all composite conditions, which is all conditions, all formations are temporary, are unreliable, can change anytime. And so get more and more familiar with that. And that is related to emptiness. And there's lots of theories about emptiness. Mostly those are just for purpose of debate. When Buddhists have to defend Buddhism against Hindus, now we don't have that problem, On a typical day in Guatemala, no Hindus are coming to your door to debate you in emptiness. Of course, it's good to study, systematically all these debates. But if you don't know how to take into your experience, into your life circumstance, they're not very useful.
And that was actually Peru, not Guatemala. I misspoke.
How? Taste the fruit of Dharma practice. Don't read so much about what it tastes like. Okay, so we're going to stop here today. And I thank you for your understanding and patience with this program that keeps changing. But I think with the discussions that we've had, with the information, the Dharma that we have, we can more effectively, I think, put these practices, hopefully, into our experience. So that, like I said, sometime in April, we will have the Amitabha empowerment. But maybe you forgot, but I'll remind you. Now, even this Amitabha empowerment is not necessarily, or at least you should say, it's not limited to, now I can practice Amitabha. In fact, you can practice Amitabha without the empowerment, actually. So it's not about, I get another transmission. Oh, yes, I can practice Amitabha. But the empowerment is actually a way of leading disciples into to enter the door of secret mantra. And in terms of that, there are the 4 empowerments, in which the first empowerment, called the vase empowerment, is, especially Kyopa Jigten Sumgön says, the very first empowerment of the 4 is the one that is most crucial to fully understand. When you have that fully and firmly and clearly, then the other 3 empowerments becomes very natural. Likewise, with the 4 immeasurable minds, if you get Maitri down really good, the other three becomes very natural, very easy to develop. Likewise with the Four Noble Truths, if you understand noble truth of suffering, the other three kind of very naturally follows. So this is the great pith instruction of Kyopa Jigten Sumgen. He says, whereas other people consider the profound teachings to be profound, I consider the preliminary, the fundamental, to be truly profound. And so, in terms of this, and so when we get to the Amitabha empowerment, mainly it's the four empowerments, and then we're going to spend a little bit more time working on understanding the vase empowerment, the first of the four empowerments. The other three, in some ways, right now, we may not have the capacity to take the three, but as a matter of ritual, it will be done. But if we spend too much time speculating on what it means, the second, the third, and the fourth, then again, Dharma becomes theory, ideas. In the past, it's quite clear that these four empowerments weren't necessarily given in one ceremony. They were given throughout the lifetime of a practitioner's lifetime. Take the vase empowerment, then train many years until certain realizations have appeared, the signs of realization has appeared, the guru can see, then the guru will say, now you're ready for the secret empowerment, the second empowerment. But since, myself playing the role of the Vajra master, don't have that kind of ability to train leading to realizations, then we will give and take the empowerment more in the spirit of continuing the continuity of empowerment, which is, an important blessing. But then if we sincerely work on understanding the meaning, then it becomes very good. Yeah. Kyoba Rinpoche, in his big bodhicitta transmission ceremony, he always goes back and forth. Even someone like Kyoba Rinpoche, how much more someone like me. Even someone like Kyoba Rinpoche, he goes back and forth between, he will say, okay, now, at this point of the ritual, you are to view the Lama giving this as the Buddha himself. So he's talking about himself, he's saying to the disciples, you have to see me as a Buddha. Otherwise, this is not going to work. So he will say like this. Then in the same ceremony, he will say, me, this little worm. That's when he's talking more about him, rather than the role that he's playing. The role that he's playing, he says, you need to see me as Buddha. Otherwise, you're not able to connect with bodhicitta. Then when he's talking about himself, the human side, he will say, me, this little worm, this little insect. That's Tibetan is translated that way, As for me, this little insect. So even Kyoba Rinpoche, speaks of himself like that. How much more, people like me. So at the empowerment, I will also have to say, and now you have to, view that Amitabha is here to give you empowerment. That the Vajra master is none other than Amitabha. Please, I'm not making any claims about Hanlai yeah, being a Buddha. At best, yeah, along the lines of Kyuba Rinpoche, I'll have to say, me, yeah, the poo of the little insect, yeah, not the little insect. Okay, now dedication. Simple, short, but very profound. As usual, yeah, we will chant the bodhicitta dedication. But before we chant the bodhicitta dedication, understand that when we dedicate merit, we're not only dedicating our own merit. Kyuba Rinpoche taught us to dedicate, first of all, the merit of Buddha nature. The supreme merit is the merit that comes from the fact that we all possess Buddha nature. So think of that merit. Then think of the merit, the virtue accumulated by all those beings who have become Buddhas. And think of the merit and virtue of all those beings that are on their way to become Buddha. Kyuba Rinpoche said, you can take all of that merit, and you can possess all of that merit mentally. He says, gather all of that merit. Then join it with whatever merit you feel you have accumulated by participating in this. Then whatever merit you think I may have giving these teachings, you take that as well. Take all of it and say, may all of this go towards the enlightenment and the freedom of all beings without exception. Changchu Sem Choren Boche Ma Kye Pa Nang Kye Gyu Che Kye Pa Nyam Pa Me Pa Yang Gong Ne Gong Du Bell War Sure. Okay, thank you everyone.